For these 6 food enthusiasts, their passion for culinary adventures became their final meal. From competitive eating gone wrong to deadly dietary choices, these are the stories of people who died from the very thing that was supposed to nourish them. It was July 18, 2015, and the sweltering afternoon heat shimmered off the asphalt at the county fair in Bakersfield, California. The carnival atmosphere buzzed with excitement as nearly 800 fairgoers gathered around the outdoor eating contest stage, their voices creating a cacophony of anticipation mixed with the distant sounds of carnival rides and country music. The smell of funnel cakes and barbecue smoke hung heavy in the 98-degree air, while colorful banners advertising the Ultimate Spice Challenge fluttered in the dry desert breeze. Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the competition table loaded with increasingly dangerous peppers. At 28, the construction worker had spent 3 years building his reputation on the local eating contest circuit, transforming what started as a weekend hobby into a legitimate source of extra income. His calloused hands, weathered from years of concrete work, now trembled slightly with anticipation rather than the jackhammers he operated during the week. Marcus had methodically prepared for this moment over the past 2 months, gradually building his tolerance by consuming progressively hotter peppers during his lunch breaks at construction sites. His co-workers had grown accustomed to seeing him sweating profusely while eating what appeared to be innocent-looking peppers, often betting on whether he'd make it through the day without reaching for milk. His girlfriend Lisa watched nervously from the front row, having witnessed his training regimen transform their kitchen into a laboratory of heat and pain. The local newspaper had featured Marcus in a small article the previous week, dubbing him Bakersfield's Iron Stomach after his victory at the county's hot dog eating contest. His mother had clipped the article and hung it on her refrigerator, though she worried constantly about his dangerous hobby. Marcus carried the newspaper clipping in his wallet, pulling it out whenever doubt crept into his mind about whether the physical toll was worth the modest prize money. The contest began with innocent jalapenos, but Marcus knew the real challenge lay ahead with ghost peppers and the dreaded Carolina Reapers. His strategy involved controlling his breathing and maintaining steady consumption without showing weakness to the judges or his 4 competitors. The prize money of $500 would cover his truck payment, making this more than just a test of endurance. As the contest progressed through increasingly dangerous varieties, Marcus maintained his composure while 2 competitors tapped out during the habanero round. His technique of chewing quickly and swallowing immediately had served him well in previous contests, but the super hot peppers demanded a different approach entirely. During the final round featuring Carolina Reapers measuring over 2.2 million Scoville units, Marcus bit into the wrinkled red pepper with characteristic confidence. Within seconds, the burn tore through his throat, triggering violent coughing and spasms. He struggled to breathe as his airway began to seize, and his face flushed as the crowd's cheering turned to confusion. Witnesses saw him clutch at his neck and stumble backward off his stool. Paramedics reached him in under a minute, but severe laryngeal spasms and swelling made ventilation difficult. Despite continuous efforts to restore breathing, Marcus Thompson was pronounced dead at 3:47 p.m. at the fairgrounds medical tent from asphyxia secondary to airway obstruction following capsaicin ingestion. The fair's organizers immediately suspended all extreme spice eating contests and required trained medical staff at future events. Lisa later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the event organizers, which drew attention from other county fairs across California. Within a year, several local events quietly adopted similar safety protocols, making emergency medical oversight standard practice at competitive eating contests statewide. It was October 3, 2014, and the elegant ambiance of a small omakase restaurant in downtown Seattle created an atmosphere of refined sophistication as soft jazz music played over the gentle murmur of conversation. The intimate 40-seat restaurant had been meticulously prepared for the evening's most important guest, with Chef Tanaka personally selecting each piece of fish from the morning's market delivery. Warm lighting reflected off polished bamboo surfaces, while the subtle aroma of soy sauce and wasabi filled the air. Eleanor Hartwell adjusted her reading glasses as she reviewed her notes from previous visits, her reputation as the Pacific Northwest's most fearless food critic preceding her into every establishment. At 45, the magazine writer had built her career on seeking out the most authentic and challenging culinary experiences, never backing down from exotic preparations that intimidated lesser critics. Her editor had specifically requested this review after hearing rumors about Chef Tanaka's legendary fugu preparation skills. Eleanor's extensive travels throughout Japan had exposed her to fugu multiple times, but she understood that American preparation standards varied wildly from the rigorous training required in Tokyo. She had spent the afternoon researching the restaurant's credentials and Chef Tanaka's background, discovering his 15-year apprenticeship under a master fugu chef in Osaka. Her photographer sat discreetly at the bar, ready to document what they hoped would be a groundbreaking review. Her colleagues at a regional culinary magazine had warned her about the risks, but Eleanor dismissed their concerns as typical American paranoia about authentic cuisine. She had consumed fugu in Tokyo's most prestigious establishments without incident, and her reputation depended on fearlessly exploring culinary frontiers that others wouldn't dare approach. The magazine's insurance policy specifically excluded coverage for food poisoning from exotic dishes, but Eleanor had signed the waiver without hesitation, viewing such precautions as obstacles to genuine food journalism. The omakase began with conventional selections, allowing Eleanor to assess the chef's knife skills and ingredient quality. Each piece demonstrated exceptional technique, building her confidence in the evening's climactic course. She took detailed notes between bites, already crafting paragraphs about the restaurant's attention to detail and authentic preparation methods. When the fugu sashimi arrived, Eleanor admired the translucent slices arranged like flower petals on the ceramic plate. Chef Tanaka had prepared the dish using pre-processed imported fillets that had been cleaned and filleted by certified processors in Japan, though the delicate fish may have been mishandled during transport or storage. Eleanor consumed the delicate fish with enthusiasm, noting the subtle texture and clean flavor that distinguished properly prepared fugu from its deadly reputation. Within 20 minutes, Eleanor noticed a slight tingling sensation in her lips, initially attributing it to the restaurant's steak selection or the excitement of experiencing such a rare delicacy. She continued taking notes as the tingling spread to her fingertips, still believing this was a normal response to the fugu's unique properties. The tetrodotoxin began its systematic assault on Eleanor's nervous system, progressing from tingling to complete numbness with terrifying efficiency. Her speech became slurred as she tried to signal the waiter, but her motor functions were rapidly shutting down. Eleanor remained fully conscious as paralysis spread throughout her body, her mind sharp even as her ability to move or speak disappeared entirely. She collapsed forward onto the table, her pen still clutched in her paralyzed hand as her respiratory system began failing. The restaurant staff called 911 immediately, but Eleanor Hartwell died at her table at 8:23 p.m., her final review forever incomplete. Chef Tanaka's fugu license was revoked permanently, and the restaurant closed within a month of the incident. A regional culinary magazine published a memorial feature about Eleanor's career and the dangers of exotic cuisine, sparking nationwide debates about the regulation of dangerous delicacies in American restaurants. It was September 12, 2016, and the crisp autumn morning in Portland, Oregon, carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and morning dew as Daniel Rodriguez explored the wooded area behind his suburban neighborhood. The 38-year-old software developer had transformed his weekend hiking routine into an obsession with wild foraging, spending countless hours studying field guides and online forums dedicated to identifying edible plants and fungi throughout the Pacific Northwest. Daniel's modest apartment overflowed with foraging equipment and reference materials, his kitchen counter permanently cluttered with dehydrators, scales, and specimen containers. His social media accounts documented every successful foraging expedition, inspiring dozens of followers to explore their own relationships with wild food sources. His girlfriend, Sarah, had grown accustomed to their refrigerator containing mysterious mushrooms and unfamiliar greens that Daniel insisted were both safe and delicious. That morning's discovery seemed like the perfect conclusion to 2 years of careful study and gradual confidence building. Daniel had found what appeared to be a substantial cluster of honey mushrooms growing on a decaying oak tree, their golden caps and distinctive ring patterns matching every photograph in his extensive reference library. He carefully harvested several pounds, already planning the social media post that would showcase his latest success. Daniel's confidence had grown steadily over months of successful identifications, leading him to take increasingly bold risks with species that required more nuanced identification skills. His online foraging group had praised his previous finds, reinforcing his belief that he had developed the expertise necessary to safely harvest wild mushrooms for consumption. Back in his kitchen, Daniel prepared the mushrooms using a simple sauté technique, adding butter, garlic, and fresh herbs from his balcony garden. The aroma filled his apartment as he settled down to work on a coding project, consuming a generous portion while reviewing client specifications. The mushrooms tasted slightly different from his previous honey mushroom finds, but he attributed the variation to seasonal changes or the specific tree species they had grown on. 8 hours later, while debugging a particularly complex algorithm, Daniel began experiencing severe abdominal cramps that doubled him over at his desk. The pain intensified rapidly, accompanied by violent vomiting that wouldn't subside despite his attempts to stay hydrated. What he had confidently identified as honey mushrooms were actually destroying angel mushrooms, containing lethal amatoxins that had begun their systematic assault on his organs. Sarah found him collapsed in his bathroom that evening, barely conscious and unable to keep down even small sips of water. The ambulance rushed him to a nearby hospital, where doctors immediately suspected amatoxin poisoning based on his symptoms and foraging history. For the next 24 hours, Daniel experienced a deceptive period of improvement that gave his family hope. His vomiting subsided, and he seemed to be recovering. However, blood tests revealed his liver enzymes were climbing to dangerous levels as the amatoxins continued their silent destruction of his organs. By the 3rd day, Daniel's liver and kidneys had begun shutting down completely. Despite aggressive treatment including liver dialysis and experimental antidotes, Daniel Rodriguez died at 6:30 a.m. on September 15th from multiple organ failure. The Mycological Society used his case to develop new educational programs, emphasizing the deadly consequences of misidentification, particularly with Amanita species that closely resemble edible varieties. It was June 14, 2017, and the elegant ballroom of a hotel in downtown Nashville sparkled with candlelight and laughter as 200 wedding guests celebrated the union of college sweethearts Amanda and Michael. The reception's southern charm was evident in every detail, from the magnolia centerpieces to the string quartet playing softly in the corner. The aroma of bourbon-glazed salmon and herb-crusted chicken filled the air, as guests enjoyed the carefully planned menu. Rebecca Chen smoothed her bridesmaid dress as she surveyed the dessert table, her excitement about the celebration temporarily overriding the dietary vigilance that had kept her safe for 31 years. As an elementary school teacher, she had grown accustomed to managing her severe tree nut allergy in classroom settings, but social events still required constant attention to ingredient lists and preparation methods. Rebecca had been diagnosed with her life-threatening allergy during childhood, experiencing several close calls that had taught her family the importance of carrying epinephrine and reading every food label carefully. However, recent years of successful avoidance had made her somewhat complacent about the precautions that had once been second nature. Her EpiPen sat forgotten in her purse, locked in her car in the hotel's parking garage. The bride had specifically informed the caterer about Rebecca's allergy, and the kitchen staff had prepared alternative desserts that appeared safe for consumption. Rebecca felt confident in the venue's assurances and was determined not to let her dietary restrictions dampen the celebratory atmosphere. She had been looking forward to this wedding for months, having helped plan many of the details during her frequent visits to Nashville. As the evening progressed, Rebecca indulged in what appeared to be a safe chocolate mousse cake, not realizing that the pastry chef had substituted almond flour for traditional wheat flour to create a more sophisticated texture. The dessert's rich chocolate flavor masked any hint of the ground almonds that were now triggering her immune system's catastrophic response. Within minutes of consuming the dessert, Rebecca felt her lips beginning to tingle and swell. She initially attributed the sensation to the champagne or the excitement of the evening, continuing to chat with other guests while her body began its deadly allergic cascade. The tingling quickly spread to her throat as her airway began constricting with alarming speed. Rebecca realized with growing panic that she was experiencing anaphylaxis, but her EpiPen was 3 floors down in the parking garage. She tried to signal for help, but her voice was already becoming hoarse as her throat swelled shut. Other guests noticed her distress and immediately called 911, but Rebecca's condition was deteriorating faster than emergency responders could arrive. She collapsed on the dance floor surrounded by panicked wedding guests, her face turning blue as her respiratory system shut down completely. Despite frantic CPR attempts by several guests with medical training, Rebecca Chen was pronounced dead at 9:34 p.m. from anaphylactic shock. The joyous celebration transformed into a nightmare that would haunt everyone present for years to come. It was August 7th, 2013, and the late afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows of Martha Stevenson's farmhouse in rural Iowa, illuminating rows of mason jars filled with the summer's harvest. The 56-year-old retired librarian had transformed her post-career years into a celebration of traditional homemaking skills, spending countless hours in her extensive garden and preserving vegetables using methods passed down from her grandmother. Martha's pantry resembled a museum of home preservation, with shelves lined with colorful jars of pickled vegetables, fruit preserves, and canned goods that she distributed generously throughout her small farming community. Her neighbors had come to expect regular deliveries of her homemade preserves, often requesting specific items for church potlucks and family gatherings. Martha took immense pride in maintaining these traditional skills that she felt were disappearing from modern life. Her approach to canning deliberately avoided modern safety guidelines, which she viewed as unnecessary complications of simple processes that had sustained families for generations. Martha's grandmother had successfully preserved food using water bath methods for all vegetables, and she saw no reason to invest in pressure canning equipment or follow updated safety protocols that seemed overly cautious. That summer's green bean harvest had been particularly abundant, and Martha decided to preserve several dozen jars using her grandmother's water bath technique. She carefully cleaned the beans and packed them into sterilized jars with salt and water, processing them in boiling water for what she believed was adequate time to ensure safety. The jars sealed properly and were stored in her cool, dark pantry, alongside hundreds of other preserved foods. 3 months later, Martha selected a jar of her green beans to accompany her evening meal, noting that they smelled slightly different from previous batches, but attributing the change to a new variety she had grown in her garden. The beans tasted somewhat off, with a subtle metallic flavor that she dismissed as a result of the jar's extended storage time. By the following morning, Martha began experiencing the first symptoms of botulism poisoning. Her vision became blurred and doubled, making it difficult to read or focus on television programs. She attributed these symptoms to eye strain from her recent quilting project, not recognizing the neurological signs of botulinum toxin exposure. The toxin systematically attacked Martha's nervous system, causing progressive muscle weakness that began with her facial muscles and spread throughout her body. Her speech became slurred, and swallowing became increasingly difficult as the paralysis advanced. Martha was alone in her isolated farmhouse, with no immediate neighbors close enough to check on her regularly. As her respiratory muscles became paralyzed, Martha lost the ability to call for help or move from her kitchen chair. She died alone at her kitchen table at approximately 2 a.m. from respiratory failure caused by botulism poisoning. Her body was discovered 3 days later by a concerned neighbor who had come to check on her after missing their weekly coffee meeting. It was February 22, 2018, and the morning sun filtered through the large windows of a natural living market in Boulder, Colorado, casting geometric shadows across the polished concrete floors. The store's carefully curated atmosphere promoted wellness and natural living, with organic produce displays and educational materials about raw food diets prominently featured throughout the 3,000-square-foot space. Trevor Walsh moved through the store with the confident stride of someone who had found his life's purpose in promoting what he believed was humanity's most natural way of eating. At 33, the yoga instructor had spent 4 years gradually eliminating all cooked foods from his diet, convinced that heating food above 118 degrees destroyed essential enzymes and life energy that his body required for optimal health. Trevor's social media presence had grown to over 1,000 followers who documented his journey toward what he called living food consciousness. His daily posts featured elaborate raw food preparations and philosophical discussions about the spiritual benefits of consuming unprocessed foods. Several of his yoga students had adopted similar dietary approaches after witnessing his apparent vitality and energy levels. His morning routine always began with a complex smoothie containing raw dairy products sourced from a small farm outside Boulder that specialized in unpasteurized milk and cheese. Trevor believed that pasteurization destroyed the beneficial bacteria and enzymes that his body needed to maintain its natural balance. He had been consuming these products for over a year without any apparent adverse effects. That morning, Trevor prepared his usual smoothie using raw milk, unpasteurized goat cheese, and various organic vegetables from the store's produce section. The combination created a thick, nutrient-dense beverage that he consumed while reviewing his schedule for the day's yoga classes. He felt energized and focused, attributing his sense of well-being to his disciplined approach to nutrition. Trevor taught his morning yoga sessions with characteristic enthusiasm, guiding students through challenging poses while discussing the connection between pure nutrition and spiritual awareness. His students noticed his usual energy and passion, with no indication that dangerous E. coli bacteria from the contaminated dairy products were already establishing themselves in his digestive system. 2 days later, Trevor began experiencing severe abdominal cramps that he initially attributed to detoxification processes that he believed were natural parts of his dietary approach. The pain intensified throughout the day, accompanied by bloody diarrhea that he dismissed as his body purging toxins. Trevor's commitment to avoiding conventional medicine prevented him from seeking immediate treatment. During his evening yoga class on February 24th, Trevor collapsed while demonstrating a complex pose, his body overwhelmed by septic shock as the bacterial infection spread throughout his bloodstream. His students immediately called 911, but Trevor's kidneys had already begun failing as toxins flooded his system. The E. coli bacteria had caused severe damage to his intestinal lining, allowing dangerous substances to enter his bloodstream and trigger a cascade of organ failure. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes and found Trevor unconscious and severely dehydrated, his blood pressure dangerously low as his body struggled to fight the overwhelming infection. Despite aggressive fluid resuscitation and antibiotic treatment during transport to a nearby hospital, his condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. Trevor Walsh was pronounced dead at 8:52 p.m. from septic shock and multiple organ failure caused by E. coli contamination. Health investigators traced the bacteria to the unlicensed dairy operation, where Trevor had purchased his raw milk products, leading to the farm's immediate closure and criminal charges against the owners. The yoga community mourned Trevor's death, while grappling with questions about the extreme dietary practices he had promoted. His studio implemented nutrition education classes, emphasizing balanced approaches to healthy eating, and public health officials used his case to educate the community about the serious risks associated with consuming unpasteurized dairy products. Thanks for watching. Click the next video to discover more shocking stories that will make you think twice about what's on your plate.